All right. Good evening and welcome to our Monday evening Ohio Division of Real Estate Salesperson Exam Prep. Very excited to have all of you guys with us this evening. We are going to dive into exam prep via our preferred prep software, which if you at Hondros, you likely have access to, and that is the CompuCram. So I'm going to share my screen here. And for those of you who are in a position to, go ahead and pop those cameras on. Let us see those beautiful smiling faces as we work through some exam problems together. For those of you joining us for the first time, or for those of you who haven't been able to join us recently, just a little reminder, we are going to work exam problems from the CompuCram practice exam, and then would like for, whenever we read through a question, I want you guys to drop what you think the answer is in the chat box. So there's going to be multiple choice, so you just have to put an A, B, C, or a D. And then if you don't know the answer, you don't have any idea what's going on, just put a question mark or type I don't know. And what that'll allow us to do is to know where we really have to get in and explain some of the content. Another thing that I'm going to do tonight, we're going to record these sessions throughout the month of October, just because we know you guys can't make it every week. Doing it one night a week sometimes isn't enough for all of us to build the confidence or the expertise that we need to go in there and take the exam. So we'll be recording these, and instead of doing a few different segments that you guys are looking for, I'd like to take this time to target the top three sections for the real estate exam. How am I deciding which are the top three? So one important thing to remember as you prepare for your real estate exam is that all sections are not created equal, right? So there are some sections like contracts that have 14 of the 75 questions or 85 questions come from contracts. Property management and leasing will have 1 to 2 questions on your exam. So if you can really know contracts well, it's going to more than compensate for not knowing leasing or property management at all, right? So the big three that we will focus on are contracts, general principles of agency, and the practice of real estate. So between those three, I believe that there are 35 of the 75 or 85. Let me see real quick. 35 of the 35 of the 80. So 35 of the 80 questions on your national exam are going to be in those three sections. And you need to get 56 questions right to pass the national exam, the national portion. So getting all of those right basically means that, you know, you can go 50-50 on the balance questions and still pass. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in with contracts. So again, guys, get your chat boxes open, and I'm going to read the question and then read each of the answers. And then once we have some answers in the chat box, we'll see if we're right. All right, question number 1. In a face-to-face meeting, a farmer offers to pay a roofer to install a roof on his barn. The roofer says, I'll do it tomorrow. Which type of contract do they have? Is it A, voidable, B, express, C, an option, or D, unilateral? A, B, C, or D? All right, seeing a lot of B's and D's in the chat box. So we will go with B for express, and that is correct. An express contract is an agreement that has been expressed in words, either spoken or written. So this is the most simple form. It's just, you said you would do something and now, you're obligated to do it. That's our verbal contract, or it could be in writing and still be considered an express contract. An option contract, unilateral contract are in fact the same. An option contract is a unilateral contract where after the contract is completed, there is a unilateral decision-making process to see whether or not it is executed. And then voidable just means that the contract is able to be voided because there is some sort of distressed party involved. All right, question number 2. Dave is told by his lender that his debt ratio exceeds the limit set by the FHA. Dave was hoping to get financing through the FHA because he only has 5% to put down. On the way to his apartment, Dave sees a sign in the yard that reads rent to own, credit problems okay. Which agreement is the best fit for Dave's situation? Is it A, a net lease, B, a lease with the option to purchase, C, a life estate, or D, a purchase agreement? A, B, C, or D. All right. A lot of these in the chat box, and so we'll be going with that again, and that is correct. A purchase agreement is no different than just a standard offer to purchase, which we know Dave can't do. A net lease is not going to apply here. That is one where he pays all insurance, taxes, and utilities to lease a property. Not really relevant. So the life estate with an option to, or excuse me, a lease with the option to purchase is going to be right here. That's the rent to own scenario. LaShawn, I see you raising your hand. Do you have a question, or is that in error, my friend? Can either unmute if you have a question to ask, or just let me know in the chat box. All right, question number 3. John, a buyer, makes an offer on Mary's home. Mary feels the offer is too low and makes a counteroffer. John is not interested in paying any more than his original offer, so he doesn't reply to Mary's counteroffer. 2 weeks later, Mary's desperate to sell and calls John to accept his original offer. Does John have to purchase the home at his original price? A, no, too much time has passed, but Mary has accepted. B, yes, as long as Mary has signed the original offer. C, no, John has no obligation to purchase. Or D, yes, he is bound by the original offer that Mary now accepted. All right. C's are flooding the chat box here, and that is going to be the correct answer. This is one of those times where what you're learning for your real estate exam is going to be important for your actual real estate practice. And that is whenever you counteroffer, actually 2 things are taking place. You are declining the first offer and killing it. It is now dead as though it never even existed, and then putting forth a separate offer. So you cannot go back to that original offer. The person can offer it again if they so choose, which they would be unlikely to do in this scenario, knowing that they now have leverage. But the counteroffer extinguishes the original offer. It cannot be accepted when the counter is there because it is declined and a new offer is put forth. All right, a home buyer wishes to make an offer on a home but has little money. On the contract, he puts down $0 as earnest money. Which of the following is true regarding the validity of this contract? A, the contract is not valid without earnest money. B, the minimum earnest money must be at least 1% of the offering price. C, the contract when signed by the seller is fully enforceable. Or D, even if the seller signs the contract, the buyer is not bound to it. What is true regarding the validity of this contract? All right. Seeing some C's in the box and a D potentially. Sherelle, thank you. She says, I don't know. We'll go with C. And that's going to be true. There is no requirement for earnest money. It is a good faith deposit put forth by by the buyer, and it's a great idea. It shows intent, it shows interest, but it does not impact the validity of the contract. So, really important to remember, earnest money is not required to form a contract. It's not required to form a contract. All righty, question number 5. Ben is not quite ready to purchase, so he rents a home with the option to purchase after 2 years. The option to purchase is an example of a blank contract. A, bilateral, B, mutual, C, unilateral, or D, promise and exchange. What type of contract is rent to own? Or excuse me, rent with the option to purchase. Should be a few trigger words for you guys here. Option and option to purchase should be triggering unilateral, right? Option contracts are unilateral contracts. They're one-way contracts, which means that if Ben enters into this agreement, there are going to be terms inside of the agreement about the home. And then when it comes time after 2 years for him to activate that option, he's the only party that gets to decide whether or not he buys that house. So there's one decision maker and it's unilateral versus a purchase agreement, which is bilateral, which means 2 people have to agree to it. All right. Question number 6. Seller Joe's agent personally delivered Mary's offer to buy his house. Joe said he would like to think about it for a couple days. Later that week, without making a single change to the contract, Joe decided to accept Mary's offer and signed it. He then addressed it to Mary, went to the post office, and mailed it. Is the contract binding to both parties? A, yes, because Joe sent it to Mary in the mail. B, no, because Joe did not give it back to his agent. C, yes, because all that was required was Joe's signature. Or D, no, because Mary has not received it from her agent. What do we think here? All right, couple of A's trickling into the chat box. We like to see that. And we will go with A, and that is correct. So the story here is, this is the little item known affectionately as the mailbox rule, the mailbox rule. And what the mailbox rule says is that if it goes into the post office or it goes into the US mail, even just your mailbox with the flag up, that is considered delivery and acceptance. And so keep that in mind. That is going to show up on your test. The same question will show up on your test, and someone will have the offer signed, but they intend to mail it tomorrow morning. Nope, not a binding contract. We are not under contract at that time. When it goes into the mail, it goes to the post office, the flag goes up, the mailbox rule takes effect, and you are under contract. Now, is this antiquated? Of course it is. You're 9 times out of 9 going to be working in sort of a digital signature platform. But for your exam, know the mailbox rule and keep your guard up on questions like this. All right. Walton decides to sell his cabin on the lake and offers it in a letter to his regular postman, Bill, at a price of $5,000. Sounds like hell of a deal. The next day, Walton receives a note from his neighbor, a close friend of the postman, and says, I accept your offer. Is Walton obligated to sell to his neighbor? A, yes, because the acceptance was within 3 days. B, yes, because both offer and acceptance were in writing. C, no, because only the offeree can accept the offer. Or D, no, because no licensed agent was involved. What do you think? Is old Walt obligated to sell to his neighbor? Right, a lot of you guys say no, and you are right, because only the offeree can accept the offer. It is not a universal offering. It was an offering to the postman Bill, and Bill only. And so doesn't matter how or where or when the neighbor communicates acceptance of Walton's offer, he cannot accept. All right. Susan offered to trade her 4-bedroom, 3-story townhome near the subway station for John's 1-room cabin in the mountains. John promptly accepted her offer. A week later, at Susan's attorney's office, they signed a contract setting forth the even swap. In light of the apparent wide disparity in the value of these two properties, is Susan obligated to fulfill her side of the agreement if she changes her mind before closing? A, no, Susan was under undue influence. B, no, John is obviously taking advantage. C, yes, if all elements of a valid contract are present, the adequacy and equality of consideration is not critical to its validity. Or D, yes, because Susan initiated the transaction. So yes or no, and then why? And remember, guys, if you don't know, just put a question mark in the box or type I don't know. Perfectly okay. All right, so Lavinia says yes, but not entirely sure why. Seeing enough C's in there to go with C, and that's going to be correct. Adequacy and value of consideration are not required to be equal to form a binding contract. The consideration just has to be valuable, right? So there is a value to John's cabin in the woods, and there, that then it fulfills the consideration qualification to form a contract, right? Now, you would think maybe that she's under, she not right state of mind, or she under undue influence, like you would think maybe, but they cue that up with she's signing it at her attorney's office, and her attorney likely wouldn't allow that to take place if she was under duress or undue influence. So yes, the value of the properties do not have to be equal. They can be disparate and still form a contract. All right, guys, question number 9. Seller Sam decides to purchase buyer Bob's home. He submits a written offer stipulating that time is of the essence and that the offer must be accepted in writing before 12 o'clock noon, 3 days hence. On the 3rd day at 11:30, buyer Bob telephones seller Sam and says that he has decided to accept his offer. Do the two parties have a binding contract? A, no, because Bob didn't wait until 12 noon to accept. B, yes, buyer Bob communicated acceptance to seller Sam. C, yes, Sam cannot revoke the offer. D, no, acceptance was not offered, or was not made in the manner specified. So do we have a contract, yes or no? And then why? All righty, we're seeing some B's and some D's. So we believe that some believe, yes, we have an accepted offer because buyer Bob communicated the acceptance to seller Sam, and some say no because it wasn't made in the manner specified. Um, According to the question, the offer must be accepted in writing before 12 noon, and buyer Bob telephoned seller Sam. So this should not be a binding contract, will not be a binding contract, because that acceptance did not come in the format requested or required by the offer. Important one to keep an eye on there. All right, guys, we are to the old option agreement. An option agreement is both a bilateral contract and a unilateral contract. B, neither a bilateral or unilateral contract. C, a unilateral contract. Or D, a bilateral contract. All right, seeing a number of C's in the chat box. It looks like we've got this one sorted out. Yes, it is a unilateral contract. An option agreement is a unilateral contract because it is the decision is with one party. All right. Question number 11, a large mirror that the buyer wants to remain with the property should A, be identified as a fixture in the sales contract, B, be disregarded as having no consequence, C, never be included in the sales contract, or D, be agreed upon verbally with its price stated in the contract. What do you do with the large mirror? All right, guys, seeing a sufficient amount of A's in the chat, and we'll go with that. So a fixture is going to be a defined piece of personal property that stays with the real property. So in real life practice, be sure that you are identifying things like or even chandeliers are heavily disputed items. And especially for things that could be removable. You want to make sure you identify them as a fixture so that they're part of the real property and therefore part of the real estate contract. Otherwise, you would have to put it on a separate bill of sale. That's where personal property goes. Personal property does not go in a real estate contract. Real estate contracts are only for real property. And so your workaround there is to identify things as fixtures. All righty. Old man Jones wants to settle his affairs prior to his death by selling his land and giving the money to his children. Broker Bob lists the property and markets it. After 6 months, an offer from Widow Smith, who lives in the next county, is received in the mail. Jones immediately signs the contract without change, and Broker Bob drives to the next county to deliver a copy to the widow in person. What might prevent this from being a binding contract? A, Widow Smith's death before Bob can relate Jones' acceptance. B, either Widow Smith is incompetent or Widow Smith's death before Bob can relate Jones' acceptance. C, Widow Smith is incompetent, or D, nothing. All right, as looks like everybody's nailed this. Two things can limit the contract from being valid: death or incapacity. Death before acceptance, or the sense that she was incapable of or incompetent and therefore could not enter into contract. All right, Adam and Jenny enter into an agreement wherein Adam will buy Jenny's house at the asking price if Jenny will install a new roof, and if Adam can qualify for a loan sufficient to cover the purchase. Until the roof is installed and until financing is obtained, the contract is said to be A, executed, B, rescinded, C, executory, or D, voidable. All right, I see a couple of D's, few D's in the chat box here. Anyone else want to venture a guess, or it's okay to say I don't know? All right, well, if we think it's D, it's actually going to be executory. An executory contract is one in which everyone's agreed to the terms and conditions, but the conditions have not yet been met. You could also view this, you'll hear this said as contingent, right? You're under contract and contingent. You're contingent on the inspection, you're contingent on the appraisal, you're contingent on financing. And then whenever you get through the contingencies, you're now pending, which just means that you're waiting to close. And that's the language that we'll use now. But that contingent is executory on a contract front. All right, question number 14. Melissa went to a dry cleaner and dropped off her Goodwill coat to be cleaned. The clerk accepted the coat. Melissa and the dry cleaning operation had just entered into what type of contract? A, implied, B, complete, C, executed, or D, unilateral? All right, the A's are filling up the chat box, and that's going to be right. This is an implied contract. When you drop a coat off to a dry cleaner, it is implied that that dry cleaner is going to clean it and you are going to pay it. In real estate, there are very few, if any, implied contracts. Get it in writing. All right, last question for contracts. Broker Bruce is working for client Jim, who wanted to buy a lot from Tom. Bruce submits to Tom a purchase and sale agreement. It is signed by Jim and stipulates a price of $1,000, a sales commission of 6%, and closing within 90 days. Tom accepts the price, but changes the commission to 5% and the closing period to 45 days, initials the changes, signs it, and returns it to broker Bruce, who gives it to Jim. Is the contract valid? A, yes, because the contract is in writing and signed by both parties. B, no, the broker's commission is non-negotiable. C, no, there is no meeting of the minds. Or D, yes, Tom initialed his changes. Do we have a contract here, ladies and gentlemen? All right, so I am seeing some C's, some question mark, and some D's. So C is correct. There is no meeting of the minds, which means the terms have not been agreed upon by all parties. Tom has initialed the changes. Now, if Jim gets the contract and initials the changes, then we're good to go. That's considered a meeting of the minds. But until that happens, this isn't a valid contract. It is, in effect, a counter offer. And so that first piece is you are not under contract at this point. All right, guys, great job there. We are going to move on to our next segment, which is going to be the practice of real estate. Practice of real estate is going to be number 2 or number 3 in terms of total volume of questions on the exam. So we definitely want to master the practice of real estate. So same rules apply here, guys. I'll read the questions. You drop a B, C, or D in the chat for the answer. A listing agent notices that the property she is listing needs some cosmetic attention. Rather than bother the seller with the chore of cleaning and making minor repairs, she advises the owner to list lower than market value to get a quick sale. The property is on the market for several months, and now the listing agent is offering the seller a list price offer. The agent has the house cleaned, does some minor repairs. The agent then sells the property for a profit of 25%. Has there been a violation? A, no, the agent is taking advantage of an opportunity. B, no, the seller could have done the repairs and clean. C, yes, the agent is self-dealing. Or D, no, the agent is doing what's best for the owner. So the agent lists the property, doesn't sell. The agent then buys it, makes some repairs, then sells it for a healthy chunk of change. So looks like everyone feels like that is a violation and is self-dealing, and that is correct. You as an agent are obligated to recommend the best marketing strategy, or what you believe is the best marketing strategy. And certainly if you have a consideration to purchase a property, which, look, we hope all of you do, it's a great way to get yourself in as an investor or a flipper or whatever, and you're somebody who's getting to screen these properties. But the thing is, you have to tell people what your intention is, right? If you say, hey, I'm going to buy this and live in it, and then they're like, oh, well, I like you, so here, I'm going to give it to you at a better rate, and then you turn around and flip it, or you make repairs that you didn't tell them to make to improve the value of the home, that is going to be a violation. The difference between fraud and misrepresentation is that A, buyer can recover only compensatory damages for fraud. B, fraud is intentional misrepresentation, while misrepresentation is unintentional. C, there is no difference between the two. Or D, fraud is unintentional and misrepresentation is intentional. All right, you guys feel like this is B, and it is B. Fraud is intentional misrepresentation of a material fact, and misrepresentation is going to be inadvertent misstatement of a fact. A broker who engages in commercial or residential property management must have a special property management trust account to receive security deposits and other funds from tenants. This account may earn interest who is the beneficiary of the interest of these rental receipts on these rental receipts? Is it A, the property manager has earned interest as a bookkeeping fee? B, the tenants should receive this in monthly pro rata payments? C, the property owners receive this interest? Or D, the state is entitled to the interest through a sheet? All right, it looks like the C's have it here, and that is correct. Brokers who manage property or properties maintain those trust accounts, and the interest should be distributed to the parties to whom the money belongs. It's not the property manager's money, right? It is, in fact, the property owner's money. Question number 4, during a listing interview, a seller demands the listing agent reduce the proposed commission by 1%. What is the best course of action for this agent? A, refuse the listing as commissions are non-negotiable. B, explain that commissions are generally fixed in each locality. C, go ahead and reduce the commission. Or D, call the broker and discuss the matter. Right. The D's start to flood the chat box, and that is going to be correct. Reductions in commissions or changes in commission is going to be at the terms of the broker, since the listing agreement is technically between the broker and the listing, or excuse me, and the seller, and you are acting as an agent of the broker, and so that is the broker's decision. However, just so you know, like, you will sometimes be asked to do this. We believe and we train our agents to be worth 7%. Your marketing plan, your expertise, your strategy, the community that you can leverage to support getting that transaction done. Some people list at 6%. And sometimes you get clients who, you get a luxury home and they graduated split, or they want a flat 5% commission. Like, those things are okay. You just want to check in with the broker. Ultimately, at Keller Williams Greater Metropolitan, it's your business, and we want you to get paid what you're worth. And ultimately know that sometimes, we have clients who are going to ask us to reduce our commission, and that's your prerogative. We'll encourage you not to, but we'll certainly support you. All right, a real estate agent presents a full price cash offer with no contingencies during the initial listing period. The seller refuses to sign the contract because he does not like the buyers. What is correct? A, the listing agent will most likely be due a commission. B, the listing contract will automatically be terminated. C, the buyer could sue for specific performance. Or D, no commission can be due unless there is a closing. All right. Looks like we're getting some D's in the chat box. Let's see, shall we? The answer is A, and this is a tricky one. It's a bit of a gummy one. Although they're not obligated to accept the offer, it is per the listing agreement, it is most likely that they will be obligated to pay a commission as the broker has done what they've hired to do. I will tell you that that's the right answer on this. You're unlikely to get a commission from somebody if you haven't sold their house. And no brokerage on the planet is going to go sue a client. I mean, a ready, willing, and able buyer was presented, and that is what's stated in the contract. However, the seller not having the sale go through, it's unlikely that, you're going to go get this. But due to the letter of the law, as it stands today, you could pursue a commission there. It is unlikely that anyone will, and I have never heard of that happening. Seller Steve calls a real estate agent to list his home. Steve tells the agent that he wants $156,000 in his pocket at closing, and the agent can have the rest as his commission. Which type of listing would this be? A, an exclusive right to sell listing. B, a net listing. C, an exclusive agency listing. Or D, an open listing. All right, so this one is going to be a net listing, which I believe are now illegal in Ohio. Don't quote me on that, but they are illegal in some states and they're frowned upon in a lot of states, and they're actually not even allowed at our brokerage. And so this is just a purely academic exercise. But net listing is where, you could sell that house for $250,000 and make a $94,000 commission. And what happens, the issue with that is you could be advising your client in the wrong way because you have a superior level of knowledge about the market to the client versus the client, and could advise them a net listing. Hey, you're probably going to net 150. Sell it for 200. This is especially problematic in the states that allow it for out-of-state sellers. So net listings are just like what they sound. It's just paying, you get the seller what they want to net, and then you keep everything else. All right. Question number 7, commingling refers to A, meeting with both brokers and sales associates present. B, depositing client funds into the broker's operating account. C, employing realtors and non-realtors in the same office. Or D, cooperating with another broker on a transaction. What, pray tell, does commingling mean? All right, you guys nailed that one. It is depositing client funds in the broker's account. So we cannot do that. We can't mix those funds. You don't have to worry about that as an agent, but it is, again, from an academic standpoint, commingling is the mixing of funds in operating accounts. And then conversion is when you take those funds and you don't necessarily commingle them, but you use them for something that they were not intended to be used for. So you take the client funds and you use them to pay the light bill. All right. A broker must keep records of all funds received and dispersed from the brokerage in a special trust account, which does not need to be included in the record. A, client social security numbers. B, the amounts received. C, the check numbers and date of funds dispersed. Or D, dates funds are received. What do you not need here? What seems unnecessary for records of funds received and dispersed? Which one of these is not like the other one? The answer is going to be A. You don't need social security numbers. You do need to know how much money was received. You need to know how the check numbers and the dates that you paid things out and the dates that you received the money, so you can reconcile the accounts. All right, question number 9. Which system can real estate brokers share listings and commissions on listings sold jointly? Is it A, the APR, B, the MLS, C, the PMI, or D, the MIP? All right, you guys were all over that one. It is going to be B, the multiple listing service. And that is where you share your listings of what makes you smarter than your clients. Question number 10. Marty, a real estate agent, has been trying to persuade his friend Bill to buy a house instead of renting. Marty suggests Bill just move out as his landlord has a duty to mitigate damages by trying to find another tenant. Bill moves out and purchases a property listed by Marty. Bill is sued by his former landlord, who wins a judgment for the unpaid portion of the lease. Whose fault is it? A, Bill's landlord. B, Marty's. C, Bill's for breaking the lease. Or D, the property owner. Who's to blame here? All right, we seem to feel that it's Bill's fault for breaking the lease. This is a little bit of a lame question, guys. The fault here lies with Marty because he induced the breaking of a contract to induce a sale. The buyer client in this case, Bill, could have recourse against Marty's broker or Marty for giving him bad information or telling him that he wasn't going to get sued. Bill is going to have to pay the judgment, but you know there is recourse available for Bill. All right, question number 11. An earnest money deposit is if any is offered, is usually given to the broker at the time of the sales contract is authorized by the offerer and presented to the offeree. Absent any contrary instructions in the sales contract, the broker has a legal responsibility to A, deposit the check in the brokerage's special trust account. B, put the check in the brokerage's fireproof safe. C, hold the check in the transaction file until closing. Or D, deposit the earnest money check into the operating account. I see you guys are already throwing A's in the chat box, and that is correct. That's why we have a special trust account. As an agent, the broker must comply with lawful instructions of their client, absent any specific instructions. They put that money into the special trust account as soon as it is received. If a client's earnest money check, upon being deposited in the broker's trust account, is returned for insufficient funds, the broker should A, resign the agency, B, call the police, C, tell the cooperating broker that the check is bounced, or D, cover the bad check personally. All right, guys. Yep. You just get on the phone and communicate when these things happen. Then, you know, sometimes these things happen and you want to make sure your client knows, make sure your other agent knows right away. That way nobody's confused. Nobody's think the wool's being pulled over their eyes. And 99% of the time it was, you know, written on an old check in a different account, or, you know, there was a transfer that didn't go through in time, and it's, you know, it's a one-day issue. But if you don't talk about it, you don't make everybody aware, and it becomes a 5-day issue, then you'll have problems. A property manager opened an interest-bearing account in which to put rents and security deposits. The funds will also be paid out for contractors who perform building maintenance. Who gets the interest on this account? A, the tenant, B, the listing broker and listing agent, C, the listing agent, or D, the owner? All right, lots of D's in the chat box, and that is going to be correct. Remember, for property management standpoint, this money belongs to the owners. So the interest belongs to the owners. Salesperson Sue has just completed a purchase and sale agreement with Bob, her client, in order to make an offer on a house. The agreement includes a good faith deposit of $5,000 in the form of a check, which Bob has given to Sue. Absent any specific instructions in regards to Bob's checks, Sue should A, give the check to her broker to deposit into the brokerage trust account once the seller has accepted the offer. B, turn it over to her broker immediately. C, give it to the seller to hold until closing. Or D, deposit the check into her personal savings account. All right, seeing a lot of B's go in there, and the answer is B. This money is due when the contract is formed, though it is not delivered to the sellers until both parties agree. So here's the thing to know about earnest money. When the offer is made and before it is accepted, that is the buyer's money. It is the buyer's money because there has correct form. All the way at the other end of the transaction, when the offer closes, it's now the seller's money, right? When the contract closes. In between, when you're under contract, it's nobody's money, and that's why most real estate disputes are earnest money disputes. So that's correct. You just get it over to the broker because you as an agent can't carry or hold earnest money. They can, and it is not the seller's money until the contract is accepted and eventually closed. All right, guys, last question for the night. Jim agrees to list his cousin's property. Jim shows a buyer client several properties, and the buyer client decides to make an offer on Jim's cousin's property. Jim declares dual agency. What does he need to disclose? A, the previous sale price of the property. B, the relation between the agent and the seller. C, that redlining is illegal. Or D, patent defects. All right, seeing the B's in the chat box again. That's going to be correct. As a dual agent has a material relationship with one party or the other, that must be disclosed. You're only required to disclose latent defects, not patent ones. And the disclosure that redlining is illegal is irrelevant here. So that is going to be all of our questions for this evening. We've got a couple minutes left here, so I'll just wrap up. I'm going to throw in the chat box before you guys leave just a breakdown of questions for the exam that I was talking about earlier. So this first set here is going to be for the national exam, which is 80 questions, 56 of which are going to be required to pass the exam. And then on the state level, there are 36 questions, which means that you have to get 28 of those right. 28 of those right to pass the exam. So if you are in a position to, go ahead and copy that out of the chat box so that you have them. And again, the reason that we had we focus on contracts and principles of agency and practice of real estate is because between those three sections, as you can see, there's 35 questions. That is nearly half of the questions on the exam are going to fall into those three sections. So guys, as you are preparing, as you continue to prepare, please take advantage of the opportunity to really master those subjects, because those are the ones that have the highest likelihood to carry you through for the exam. Okay. That's going to be all for tonight. We are here every Monday night at 6 o'clock. We will work 2 different segments next week. Next week, we will very likely get into the general principles of agency as well as financing. And then for either the last or second to last or sessions of the month, we'll deep dive some state stuff. Guys, if you are scheduled to test, please make sure myself or Danielle are aware. We would love to send would love to send you guys some love on your test day. And then also, if you have any questions, I guess I'm going to put this in the chat box too. If you're studying on your own, you're like, hey, man, I just can't really figure out what's going on with earnest money. Shoot me an email. Shoot me an email. Give me the example. Give me an example of what's tripping you up, and we will go from there. So it looks like, okay, Latanya's testing on Saturday, Lavinia tomorrow. Good luck. That's huge. And then Saranda on the 16th. Guys, that's really exciting. So Latanya and Saranda, you guys both have the opportunity for a couple of more of these maybe study sessions. So hope they are adding some good value for you all. And of course, Lavinia, good luck tomorrow. Keep us posted. Let me and Danielle know as soon as you pass, because we know you will. We're sending good vibes your way. Guys, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you for your participation. You have my information. You have some details. You have the link for next week because it's the same every week. So we will see you then. Have an awesome, awesome evening. And good luck to those of you testing before we get together again. Take care, guys.